A vigorous launching, right? A vigorous launching. Yeah, that's because a lot of times we don't know that that's what we're supposed to be doing. I'll tell you, the first time that I ever did one, I didn't really know that's what I was trying to do, was to understand myself, right? Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Did you guys, when you started on this process, understand that that's what you were actually trying to do? Was get rid of these things which later it says we found objectionable. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. How many of you guys quit drinking and using and expected life to get better? Right, immediately, without understanding, because that's the way it was for me, and so that's what the authors are describing in this moment, is we think that just the drinking and the using is, once we stop doing that, everything else is going to straighten out. But they're getting ready to tell us that that's really not the case. And that was the case for many of you, everybody that raised their hands, right? Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. So what they're doing is they're just likening our own lives, right, to a business, right, and understanding and taking inventory of what we're doing, right? And if you're not going to do that honestly and thoroughly, what's the point? You're probably going to lose money. So the authors are just describing that for us. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. So they're just taking it a little bit deeper, right? We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. So what they're describing for us here too is these little things in our lives, right, that we start doing because they serve us in some way, right? And we just continue to do them and continue to do them for whatever reason, right? I told little lies because it gets me what I wanted, or something like that, right? You know, or we've been traumatized, so we stay away from people, right? And we're not saying that trauma is your fault, ever, right? That's not what we're trying to say, right? But our continued reaction to it in a negative way that impacts us is. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. Does that make sense? Yeah. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So they're telling us it goes backwards, right? Because we think if we just stop drinking and using and we fix it, you know, I start going to the gym and I start doing all these other things, right? That everything else is gonna work out. That the spiritual is gonna get absolutely. And so if we straighten out our spiritual, the rest of it comes into line. That's what they're saying. In dealing with resentments, then they're going to tell us how to do it, because this is a process and we actually have to do it. It's not just something we can, just talk about. You know, they're going to tell us why in a little while, but in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, and principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. I thought it was super interesting that we could put institutions on there. The very first time that I started to do it, right? I'm mad at this person because they stole my crayons when I was 3, and did all these. I was mad at this person for whatever, and all those types of things. But I didn't know that institutions and principles were important too. You know, so the first time I ever attempted to do it, I was given permission not to find my part in a situation of trauma when I was a child, right? And that did me a disservice, right? Because somebody didn't point out to me that these types of things are important, right? The principles, divorce, and things of this nature that just really we don't even think about are important to put down on here, right? Because there are things that were taught to us as when we're younger, or they just begin, right? In those little tiny ways. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sexual relations, which had been interfered with? Most of those are pretty self-esteem, right? My self-esteem is what I think about myself. Our security, what am I financially secure, things of that nature, right? Our ambitions, our hope for the future, what do those look like, right? Because if you're going to take something from me I think I might want, I'm going to be pissed at you for doing so. Did I read that? Which had been interfered with. We were usually as definite as this example, and we don't usually go through that, right? But it's just 4 columns. That's all it is. And sitting and thinking about it. Well, 3 columns. You're right. Excuse me. Sean, huh? Yeah, I know. Sean's gonna make sure I do it right every time. The 3 columns, because we want people to think about it. Joe always tells me, listen, if they're writing something down, I don't care. You know, you can pull this out of it if they're writing something on paper. But we went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. And why is thoroughness and honesty important? Because if I'm trying to understand who I was so that I can become who I'm supposed to be in Him, then I need to know where I was at, right? What I was like, not what it was like. Everybody knows what it was like. I want to know what I was like. I was selfish. I was dishonesty. I was resentful. I was fearful. All of these things. How did self manifest when I go out to share this with everybody else? So they can understand the depth and weight of the story that I had that's going to propel all of us to this restored and redemptive state. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. How often is that true? Where we think everybody else is wrong but us? I mean, we should be laughing a whole lot harder on that one. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. How often do we beat ourselves up for that, especially all the time, right? We do something wrong, we tell someone to fuck off or flip them off in the thing, right? You know what I mean? And we're like, oh, you know what? They didn't really deserve that. You know what I mean? But now I'm going to stay mad at them and think of all the reasons for continuing to stay mad at them, and it just turns into this cycle of resentment and just fuck them. We don't even like them anymore, do we? Right? You know what I mean? And we'll even try to get people on board with it too. Oh, we don't. We're not there yet. We haven't said God yet. There we go. Stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. Why does it say seemed to win? Because who's hurting more from that situation when we isolate ourselves and stay away from people in our lives because they just won't act the way we want them to act, or we stay mad at them for shit we made up anyway. Right? I mean, it's really what it is. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. Has it been our experience? It's been my experience, definitely, right? Trying to stop, trying to stay stopped. But if I stay mad at them and yeah. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. Why is it infinitely grave? Because people tend to die. Yes. We found that it is fatal. That's what it tells us that. It answers its own questions usually if we give it a second. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. Do you see that? Ooh, Jeremy's going to get mad at me if I move that too much because it'll mess up his camera. I like the progression that it gave us right there, right? We go from holding on to resentment to the alcoholic insanity coming, because remember, the alcoholic insanity happens before the first drink, not the crazy shit that drunk people do afterwards. The insanity, and with us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. I have a friend of mine, a mentor, and she all the time would just be like, oh, no, I'm hanging on to that resentment. I'm not ever letting go of it. And I'm like, why? Isn't that doesn't it hurt? To hang on to it, And she goes, oh, no, I like the warm, fuzzy feeling. And I was like, oh, you're not alcoholic, are you? Right? Because it's like porcupine tines inside my belly anymore, right? The longer it goes, the longer they get, and the more deep-seated they get, right? And that's what we're trying to get rid of, because I don't want to die. I'm sure anybody else in the same boat. Grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. But what are these grouches and brainstorms too, right? What is a grouchy person? Bitch pissing and moaning about everything in their life? Or anything in their life, nothing goes right. I can't believe these people and they're doing this and they're right. And the brainstorm is just those thought storms, those thought loops that get into your head, and you just kind of keep thinking, and you play out these fantasies in your minds that, again, are shit that didn't happen and has not happened, but it could happen. So I'm going to be prepared for it if it just in case that motherfucker says that, I'm going to come back with this. Yeah. Just like that. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. We turned back to our list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. This is where they start to change their perspective on what they're doing. This is the reason that we're doing it, really. Not so we can, know where we were wrong. Because really, if we're honest with ourselves, we probably know exactly what we're doing. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. Because how many times did we try to wish away alcohol? A lot. I kept thinking that I could just put it down and I'd be all right. I mean, mine was meth, so it was a little harder. I had to sleep for a couple days. But, and I thought, and it really, for me, it went all the way back to the first 2 or 3 weeks that I had done it. I knew instantly, oh, this is doing something for me right here. I don't think this is good, and I couldn't stop. But it took, 20 years and 2 trips to prison and, a diversion program before I was like, oh, wait a second, maybe I can't do this on my own. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Well, imagine that. Didn't they just tell us we were spiritually sick too? So wait a second. Are they like us? Just maybe a little bit? Are they? Absolutely. Full of guilt, shame, and remorse, and fear, just like we are. And resentment. Sorry, I didn't want to miss out one. That is a pretty big one. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. We asked God to help us. There we go. Because when we say God, we say power. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Because we don't blame people for having cancer. I'm sure everybody's seen that, heard that one, right? But if people are spiritually sick, why aren't we mad at them for it? It's because they act like assholes. I mean, that's fair, but we're acting like assholes too. We just want our asshole to be bigger than theirs. Is that what it is? When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry, thy will be done. This is a little prayer we're going to say as we go along every day, right? God help me, whatever it looks like. I'm going to say it a bunch, I told you guys. Right? This is the attitude that we're supposed to have, because God's going to empower us to act a little kinder than we plan on being. We avoid retaliation or argument. How hard is that, you guys? Yeah, because I start getting those brainstorms in my brain, and I think about all the shit I'm going to, damn it, if they say this, I'm going to say this. We wouldn't treat, oh, wait, I'm in the wrong spot. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. That's where I was at. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. And why do we want to be helpful? Because the point is to go out into the world and share this redemption that we have with everybody else, right? Sending light and love and peace into everyone's life that we encounter as we move forward. And if we're assholes, Eddie, then we then we destroy the opportunity to help somebody. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one of them. And sometimes that kindly and tolerant view is to stay quiet. I have a hard time. My mother used to call me Mouth. She thought it was cute. I did not, because I knew what she was saying. That's my sister laughing over there. Because I tend to would say anything that came to my brain, right? So for me, God helps me to be quiet. Power. Yeah, because I couldn't do it on my own. That's for darn sure. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. That's that fourth column where we start looking for our own parts in it. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Not if we had, where? Where we had. Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and fearful. Everywhere I could. In every one of those instances, I was one of those, if not all of them. Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Right, because it doesn't matter what they did. How often do we do that all the time? It doesn't. Well, look what they did over here. How come they get to do this? I want to. Oh, well. Where were we to blame? That's the questions we're asking ourselves, right? Eyesight without insight is spiritual blindness. Whenever there's a question mark, go inward. Look within yourself. Learn to be introspective. The inventory was ours, not the other man's. Well, I don't know if I like that as much. I like to take other people's inventory way better than I like to take my own. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. Why do we think it's important to really do that? Does it make it more real? Yeah, I think it makes it more real. We can kind of refer back to it, and there's something, I say it's magical. It's not really magical, but as we write it down, I got ants in my pants today. I'm moving around a lot. We admitted our wrongs honestly, and we're willing to set these matters straight. I was working with a guy lately, and he's doing his eighth step, and he just does not want to write down the list at some point. I think we need to back up a little bit, but he's like, I'm not willing to make amends to him yet then. Well, I said, we got to back up a little bit, but just because you're writing it on the list don't even mean you're going to have to go do it soon. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It's an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. So what's the point of writing down all the other things if it was about resentment and selfishness and dishonesty? Why do we need to get rid of negative thinking? Yeah. Sean, we'll get used to this pretty soon. We'll have a good banter like me and Joe, and like you and Joe. It was an evil and corroding thread, isn't it? It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. I like that. Trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. Because it's about the decisions and the things that we make with the relationships and the people in our lives, right? All based on fear of something that may or may not be real, because they just told us that it was real or imagined, right? Slight's real or imagined, right? And we reacted in fear because we were afraid that we wouldn't get something we wanted or that we were going to lose something that we already had, essentially. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Well, now they just told on us, didn't they? Well, told us to tell on ourselves. We set the ball rolling. Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Yeah. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting God and relying upon God. Excuse me. We put them, I just lost my spot. Perhaps there's a better way, we think so, for we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon power. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. When we are in the world to play the role he assigns. I went back up to that too right there. It is probably one of the hardest things that we're ever going to do, and the authors have written quite a bit about this, to understand that trusting in God, right, for all these things in our lives. Why would we need to be fearful if God's got a plan for our lives, right? We were in the world to play the role he assigns for us. And if we know that, then all fears can melt away. Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity. Somebody was talking the other day about they deserve happiness in this world. And I pointed out that happiness is transitory and dynamic, and it moves and it changes based on the circumstances in your life, whatever that may be. The only thing that we're promised is contentment. I am content in all things, which means I can walk through it knowing that God has got me and prepared me for the moment immediately following the one that I'm in. It didn't do me any good to get scared last night when Joe said, "You're up," about what's happening right now, because I've been prepared for this moment, even if I am a little rusty and nervous. Thanks. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Have any of you thought that before? That trusting in God and relying in God was just made you weak. How can you just trust in something you can't even see? You don't even know if it's real anyway. Or that's, that's what I think what people that don't believe in God think. We can laugh at those who, I read that. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we ask him to demonstrate through us what he can do. Because that's what we're doing, is we're going out into the world and just trusting that he's going to make it happen. I was telling Chapley's wife just a little bit ago, and Chap, man, I don't need to prepare for real, right? Because I've already been prepared, and the other book tells us that don't be concerned when called to account for when you're called to account, because just open your mouth. The words are going to come out. The right thing is going to come out. We ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. I love Joe. I'd never heard anybody in my life talk about we're human beings, not human doings. We don't have to do anything to be human. We just got to be. And I just think about a couple of months ago when I did the two, be still. Be still and know. At once we commence to outgrow fear. We don't even have to do nothing. Just pray about it. Ask that it be removed. Recognize it and ask that it be removed. Now about sex, of course. Many of us needed an overhauling there, but yeah. But above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. I mean, how often are people not sensible when it comes to sex and sex relations? Let's just think about it. It's so easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to the extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is the lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it is not the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. This is probably the most important thing that they say about this situation. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. Some of us don't have enough of it, but we'd really be human. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? And the point we always like to try to make, this is just about relationships. We talk about it as sex relationships because most everyone has had one, at least by the time you get to this point, and you've probably run from the extremes that they talk about. All the sex you can get, or none at all, right? Yeah, depending. That's fair. Sean uses both hands. Yeah, and it usually depends on who we've been with or who we've just been with or what we're trying to do in the moment. We reviewed our conduct over the years past. Look back through it, right? But it's really just about relationships. It's the same types of relationships that we'd already looked at. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Right? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. So just ask yourself all the same questions that we've been asking. And these are kind of the same questions we're going to ask ourselves moving forward, too, as we go into these new relationships in our lives. Am I trying to be selfish? Am I trying to, get something? Yeah. Am I trying to be selfish? Sometimes. We reviewed I read that part. In this way, we tried to shape a sound and sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. Do we want a sane and sound future ideal sex life? Probably. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. Are we seeing a pattern here? We keep asking God to remove fears and to mold our ideals and to really just basically direct our thinking to the things that it needs to be. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. Because here's the thing, we know that it's touchy, right, as we go out into the world and, meet people, the next person that, we love, the next person that really got vulnerable with us, and we can really damage that relationship. We can really damage that person. So if we're looking at it before we go into it with this perspective, we're gonna do all right. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in doing so. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. This is where they tell us it's all about relationships, not just sex. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. That applies to every situation in our lives. You're thinking about getting a new job? Ask God, what do you want? Power. God alone can judge our sex situation. How often do we like to talk to what is it? Tell a friend, tell a phone, tell a Joni. What is it? What is the thing? I can't remember what it's called, right? When we go and talk to other people about what we should do and should not do, and we go around opinion shopping until we find the right answer that we want. That's why we ask God rather than the people in our lives. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Suppose we shall fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. What does happen? Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and on our motives. How often are we 100% of our motives, especially if we're not searching for answers from God? Are we always in tune with our own motives and intents? How many times did I had intended to get sober a lot of times prior to me actually doing so. I was motivated to do so, but it still didn't happen until God came down and snatched it out of me. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing, these are facts out of our experience. So this is, the first 100 authors and their experience with the first couple of thousand, telling you what their experience was. This is eyewitness testimony to the way that things worked for them. And to sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for the strength to do the right thing. As sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. Later in the other thing, it says when other activities fail, intensive work with another alcoholic will see us through. You know, the promises and the conditions and all of that stuff right there too. So if you're having a hard time with it because you think that's what you need in your life, keep helping people. I got to help a lot of people. If we're not sorry, this, where I'm at. I know. We earnestly pray for the right idea. If sex is very, we think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. Because the heartache takes us back out, causes resentments and fears and all these other things in our lives that it just told us can lead us to drink. Not necessarily that it will, but it can. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. And that's important because they just told us that, right? They're not doing us any good, and we've proven to ourselves, and we're aligning our experience with theirs. Doesn't do us any good. And now they've given us a pretty good example and a pretty good case for why it's fatal. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We've begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We couldn't do it for ourselves because we needed faith, right? We knew up to this point, and we're learning and beginning to learn that we had to have God's help. We couldn't do it on our own because we've been trying again and again and again to do it on our own. We've proven to ourselves time and again. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. I love it when Joe says, and I was just talking with Chad today, right? There's God's will and my opposition to it. If you want to know God's will, look around because it's happening. No matter what, it's happening, right? So I can either get on board with what's happening and be content and happy, or I can be miserable. If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your grocery handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. So you're beginning to know, and you're getting ready to understand, and getting ready to admit to God, to another human being, and to yourself, these exactly where you were and what you were doing. I guess we're ending a little bit early tonight, guys. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next week. Thank you.